What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Ancient Wisdom. This week, I'm going to be flying solo. Corey's feeling a little bit under the weather, but wanted to keep doing something, and we've got the cats here to keep things interesting since I'm no good on my own. But honestly, I think it'll be a treat for everybody, me especially, to not have to do this with Corey and to just get, the important thoughts and opinions going this time. That, of course, being those of my cats. So, say hello to the camera. Those of you watching on YouTube, we have a wonderful cat here. Excellent form, and she'll be giving us most of the useful insight this week. But mostly just want to talk about the Orlando regionals that happened this past weekend. Biggest U.S. regionals, biggest event outside of NIC in the Western world, as far as I understand. And not really an interesting breakdown in Top Cut. It almost feels like it should have been obvious what we were going to get, but Corey and I both predicted something very different, and kind of want to talk about why we got that wrong and how we came to that conclusion. So, for those of you who haven't looked at the results yet, the top 8 of the Orlando Regional had one Mew player playing Mew Aerodactyl. Very similar to the list that Xander played a couple events ago that me and Corey talked about pretty in depth. One copy of the Rayquaza Lost Box deck, played by Nick Moffat, who's been on a pretty decent tear this year. I think that's the second top 4, if I'm not mistaken. Dude's been playing really well, and that deck is solid. And then 6, just 6, Lugia VMAX, including either 3 or 4 identical lists, all in Top Cut. And that is honestly the most predictable outcome that could have happened. We were pretty low on Lugia as far as having it make like a impressive portion of the top cut up. We didn't really see it dominating the field in our like prognostication of the event. We were kind of thinking like 2-3 of them. It was done dominating top cuts, and we come out of the event with 6 Lugias in top cut, including a bunch of very strong players. Right, we've got Isaiah Bradner getting second. We've got Cal Connor in top 4. John Egg in 6th place. And then Andrew Hedrick, who won the event. And it's interesting, there was a stretch of time where a lot of the top players weren't playing Lugia, which could have been part of what led us to that prediction. But something that we talked about a lot the last episode was that Lugia's gotten so refined at this point that it really does have the answers for everything, and there's not really a matchup where you feel unfavored with the deck anymore, where you feel like you don't have the exact tools that you need to beat it. Whereas other decks have to build themselves entirely to beat Lugia. There's not like Lost Box with just the right amount of tech cards to handle Lugia. There's nothing you can tech in your deck to stop your opponent's double Archeops setup. Outside of like completely building your deck around beating it, just putting one Yveltal into a deck doesn't beat Lugia. Now, when you play 4 of them and 8 energies or 12, I don't know, whatever setup that deck has, the control decks have to, dominate the energy removal game and get yourself to the point of attrition where the Lugia players not actually doing anything. That's a strategy that can beat them, but you're not able to tech that into any random deck. So I think our process last week was pretty flawed when both Corey and I said we would play Lost Box. And more specifically, we even said we would play Kyogre Lost Box. We weren't even Team Rayquaza, which I think I still stand by. But so that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. And I think we're going to have to hold ourselves accountable in the future to take a better look at our process and make sure we're selecting decks the right way, because that was definitely a choice that was made on the grounds that we like playing Lost Box better. We like Comfy. We like making decisions with flower selecting. We like resolving Chorus's experiment and everything that goes with that. Churning through our decks that way. It's an interesting puzzle every game you play, but that doesn't mean it's the best deck, right? And we kind of talked a little bit about how smart you can make yourself feel sometimes when you're playing Lost Box, but that's not important when your goal is to win, right? It's not relevant how cool you feel playing your deck. What's relevant is winning the game. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Let's just dive into the deck list, though. So in first place, we've got Andrew Hedrick, who played a fairly standard Lugia list from what we've seen recently. This is the closest, I think, to what I like as a Lugia list. He played the 3-2 Lugia line, so kind of the almost standard at this point, thinner set of Lugia. And I think this is all you need to play to consistently hit your combo. Um, Double Luminion, which I also think has become kind of standard. Stoutland, Charizard, Yveltal, Raikou, Guru, Pumpkin, and Manaphy. Notably excluding the Dunsparce, and then played 16 energies. The most notable inclusion here is the one of Washwater energy. He did only play 3 captures and played the V-Guard. And I think this configuration is pretty common among the top cut players. So some amount of respect being given over to things like Sableye with that Wash energy to sit on your Manaphy on the bench. Which I think is interesting. I'm not sure that I buy into it being the best use of your energy slots. And for me personally, I've always liked playing the full 4 capture energies. It makes you feel a little bit less hamstrung by your 4 energies in your deck. It's less often that you have a handful of energies and can't do anything useful with them when 4 of them are captures. And I think that the extra search when you're playing the 3-2 Lugia line is really important for making it so you hit that combo as often as possible turn 1. I mentioned a minute ago that you can't really tech to beat your opponent when they have double Archeops set up, but it's pretty easy to boss up one Archeops and handle it, and then you lost 1 turn of tempo to do the gust up and knockout, but your opponent has lost all of their setup when they only have 1 Archeops, so it's very easy to build a game plan around beating that setup, and I think for me that's why it's super important to play double, or not double, the full set of capture energies. For the trainers, they did play the Irida, so their supporters were 3 Research, 2 Marnie, 2 Boss, 2 Serena in the Irida, with the normal 4 of the balls and Evolution Incense, the 1 of Vacuum and Choice Belt. They also played a Capturing Aroma and an Echoing Horn. So I don't know that I love not playing the Canceling Clone. I'm a little bit surprised to see the Irida in the deck without it, though. It does make sense that you can still Irida for your Choice Belt or Lost Vacuum whenever you need it. And the Echoing Horn clears the gap similar to Canceling Clone against Duraludon, since you're going to just bring up something else that you can knock out in that situation. So you can put like a RCSV or a Duraludon V onto their bench and then boss it up. And even if you do that over 2 turns, it's normally fine. Like the Arceus especially can't evolve into something that's immune. And you still have the 1 Lost Vacuum that you can search up, so you can use an Yveltal for one of the knockouts. But personally, I think that the Canceling Clone is a better slot there, and I would rather be insulated against Duraludon, or not Duraludon, Vikavolt Aerodactyl as well. And notably, not playing either Dunsparce or Canceling Clone tells me that this player really didn't fear that deck. They didn't feel like they were going to play against a lot of it, that it was going to take up an impressive metagame share. And I mean, the call obviously worked for them. And when I look through day 2 of the event, I don't see that much Vika. And it may have been truly just the correct call to disrespect it, which was another thing that maybe we got wrong when we were looking forward to this event. Because both of us felt that the deck had been pretty slept on for the format, despite really dominating top cuts. And this weekend, a lot of players did come into the event respecting it, and it was just gone. So the question becomes, when you look at the top cut, though, you see the players who topped really weren't paying any respect to it. There's not many Canceling Clones. I'm not going to say 0 confidently until I look through the lists again right now. I did review them, but I'm not positive. But there's not as many Clones as I would have expected. There's a lot of lists not even playing the Irida or Skyla tech. This one is playing it without the Cologne, which I think does show that it's just a really powerful engine for the deck to play, so I think that that's a really good inclusion. But it's interesting to me that maybe the fear of people doing it, a lot of Vika players maybe said, oh, well, the Lugia opponents that I've been testing against have had the answer, and, this is a zig when they zag kind of situation, and the Lugia players are off of the clone, knowing that the Vika players were going to be scared of it. That is a possibility. I'm maybe a little too conservative because I would have liked to still see the clone in here, and personally would have also tried to fit the Bird Keeper in. I think there's a number of slots. I think you're okay to get rid of like a Serena, or the Capturing Aroma doesn't really need to be here, but I also would have liked to play Dunsparce. I just don't think the gain you get from something like playing one Capturing Aroma in your deck outweighs the versatility you get from having the one of Cologne or having the one of Birdkeeper or even the Dunsparce. I will say that it's pretty easy to justify your 3/2 Lugia line with only 3 capture energies when you have that extra search card, though. That does mitigate that a decent bit. That being said, I would rather see the 4th capture energy in the deck and then shave this Aroma for a tech card. So again, obviously this player decided that Wash Energy and V-Guard were both more valuable techs than or more valuable than having one of those trainer-based techs or the Dunsparce. So they won the event. I'm obviously not going to take that away from them, and I do think this is a very good Lugia list. I've talked about this a couple times as well. You're really splitting hairs when you start arguing about these last couple slots, but ultimately I think that that is what we're going to be doing for the next couple months. Unfortunately, you'll notice there are 0 Crown Zenith cards in Top Cut, which is not like unexpected, but it's disappointing. I was really hoping to see a couple things squeak in here, and this time we got a Stone Cold 0. So that sucks, but I'm optimistic that we'll see some Zamazenta sneak in, some Sky Seal Stones, maybe some other cards. I don't think we're going to see anything like a Rotom V-Star in Top Cut, unfortunately, but a boy can dream. And we'll see what happens with some of the other cards. Moving on to second place, and we're going to get to skip out on a couple of the other lists in Top Cut once we talk about this one, is Isaiah Bradner, who has just been on a tear, debatably the best player in North America right now. Dude has just been playing fantastic all season, and that win has been eluding him, but I'm sure we'll get there eventually. That being said, I don't love this list. I do know that they test a lot, and they're very good players. That group is all incredibly good, and they've been really putting up a ton of great results, but I don't... This looks like a Lugia list that we had built, like, I don't know, a month ago. Like, there's the full Pokemon lineup that we've talked about from the other lists, including the Dunsparce, goes a little bit lighter on discard supporters, so it's only 3 research, 1 Serena, which I think is fine. I think you need 4 of that effect, the discard draw, along with your double Luminion. This list chooses not to play either of Birdkeeper or Skyla/Irida, so it's just totally giving up that sort of supporter flexibility, and does play 3 Marnie instead of the normal 2. And it's really funny to talk about this deck and act like playing triple Marnie is like an innovation. But, I mean, 2 has been completely standard for the lifetime of the format to this point. So it is, in some small way, an innovation. Something that's been discussed by other people previously has been like, well, maybe you don't want to bog your deck down with this like Skyla package, including the Canceling Cologne and that kind of stuff to beat an Aerodactyl draw. Rather, you can just Marnie them and not let them get it set up. So, you know, you'll do your little bit of setting up your first turn, do some discarding, and then Marnie and say, okay, on my next turn I will find the stuff to finish my setup. It's not a terrible plan. The Marnies can be really good against both Lost Box and Mew as well, so you might be gaining some points, especially against Rayquaza Box, by playing an extra Marnie. But I don't know that that outweighs the percentages you gain against matchups that are just like an auto loss when you're not playing any way to really deal with the Aerodactyl or the Duraludon in some situations. This list does have 2 Lost Vacuum, so you are theoretically able to clear clear 2 Duraludons using Yveltal, or just the amount of times that like that deck bricks. Again, extra Marnie is going to help you brick them more often because the deck's kind of inherently clunky. So I definitely see some options there, and I'm not saying this is just like terrible. Obviously, these players are very good, and they know what they're doing more than I do in this situation. That being said, I would prefer to see some of those other choices made. They're also playing double Choice Belt, which isn't bad in any way, but I do like the one with the tutor a little bit more. A lot of matchups where you're not really super enthused with the math on Choice Belt. This seems to me like it was a read on the rest of the room, so they're playing V-Guard Energy, and I bet the read here was that the whole room would be playing V-Guard, and you want that extra buff on your end to get over that in the mirror. But I'm not certain on that. I haven't delved too deep into what could have made that choice change this week, because for a while, like, Zero Belt was becoming a fairly common consideration, and for my money, playing 1 is still the move, but I definitely respect this list. It's doing a lot of the things that we talk about good Lugia lists doing, and is definitely getting mileage out of those last couple of tech slots. For the energy, they did play V-Guard, as I mentioned before, with only 3 capture, and played Speed Lightning as well. And this exact same list is in 5th place, 6th place, 19th place, and 29th place. So 5 copies in the top 32 of the tournament. An extremely successful run. It's really hard to put 5 players in the top 32 that all played the same list. I don't know how many of them in this tournament were on the exact same 60, but that's just a really impressive run. These guys are on a tear, and for my bet, the best players in NA right now. Moffat in 3rd place, Rayquaza box, which we already touched on. The list is interesting. Nick plays the Ice Cube along with Wash Water Energy in this deck to be kind of a mirror breaker. There's some other spots where it is really powerful to block face with the Wash Energy, so your opponent can never really clear your Ice Cube. There's some matchups where you can just win the game by doing that repeatedly. Wash Energy is not bad either way. To protect your Manaphy as well. That's the other interesting thing that Nick is doing, playing double Manaphy in his list, which can be a mirror breaker, as well as a card that can really swing your matchup against Lugia by turning off their Raikou. So having 2 of those at your disposal can be really key. That being said, when you're already playing the Wash Water Energy to protect your Manaphy, I'm not sure that I really buy into the need to play 2. I know you don't have ways to really search Wash Water out, but you do have, other than Raihan, which you do have 3 of, so it's not insane, though you normally aren't going to want to search that. But you have 2 Ordinary Rods as well, so you're able to put that Manaphy back in your deck. You could easily play the 4th Quick Ball in that slot to give yourself a little more consistency and try to combo those together to recur your Manaphy, and then you can use the Raihan in a situation eventually to search up that Wash Water and really get yourself protected. This list does not play any basic water energies, so you are relying on that Wash Water to attack with the Ice Cube, excuse me. But outside of that, there's not a lot for me to say. I think these Rayquaza box decks have gotten fairly optimized at this point. Most of the cards in here really do need to be here. And it looks pretty close to the list that we've talked about before that Pablo Mesa played at the last North American Regional. I do like the second Amazing Rare Raikou in that list. It's just a really powerful card. I wouldn't be against trying to fit that back in. But once you make space for like the Ice Cube Wash Energy line in your deck, it's hard to fit all of the techs you could want to play. Next up, we've got Calvin Connor in 4th place, our other top 4 player. Cal plays a slightly thicker Lugia line, another Lugia list. So it's a 3-3 Lugia. And all of the other cards we talked about for the rest of the Pokemon line, the Dunsparce and the Manaphy are in this one. So we've got both bench sitters. We've got the Raikou, we've got the Yveltal, we've got the Radiant Zard. Nothing much to talk about here. This list does have a Birdkeeper in the supporters, another 4 discard, draw, 3 research, and 1 Serena to make that up, 2 Marnie, 2 Boss, and the 1 Birdkeeper. Again, no Irida/Skyla. So a lot of players making the decision that they are not going to need that flexibility in that deck, that they're not going to play those matchups. And Cal made the call that players saw what the Lugia lists were doing, that they'd been playing that, and that people might shy away from playing Vikavolt or Duraludon and would maybe flock towards the Palkia Inteleon type decks, which are able to paralyze lock you when you're not playing the Birdkeeper, and choosing to use that slot on Birdkeeper instead. Also playing double Choice Belt in a single vacuum, so only 1 vacuum, 2 Choice Belts, meaning this list is going to be a little bit weaker against Dura, but once you're making the call that you're not worried about that deck, in my opinion, when you choose to not play Irida Cologne, that's the statement you're making. I don't think it's unreasonable to say I don't need to hedge any more than just having the 1 vacuum. And again, a lot of players opting for double Choice Belt this weekend. His energy lineup, the Wash Energy and the V-Guard with 3 capture, again present. So what we're seeing basically as the standard from the energy lineups in this event is 15 energy or 16 energy with 3 capture and V-Guard, and then pick your poison for the extra colored energy. Some people playing Speed Lightning, some people playing Wash Water, and I'm going to bet, this is a blind guess, that one of them plays Hiding Dark too, just because they're all good. You can justify playing all of them. There's reasons to use all of them. But really standard stuff here. And I'd be curious to pick their brains on why the sudden inclusion of V-Guard back in every list. For a while, this seemed like it was a flexible spot that not everyone was set on playing, and now it is just totally standard. Um, we get to skip the next two, Reagan and John, both playing the exact same 60 as our boy Isaiah, and go to 7th place with Austin Reed. Let's check. Let's get to these energies. He played 15 energies. He played 4 capture and no extra colored source. Bummer. Same Pokemon lineup as the last list we talked about with the 3/3 Lugia line. Some extra discard cards. This is actually pretty close to what I would have been looking at on the trainers. This is a 4 research and a Serena, so I think that's too many of the discard effects. But 2 bosses, only 1 Marnie, which again I do like having 2 of those. There's too many matchups where it's really strong. But they managed to fit both Birdkeeper and Skyla, as well as the 1 Lost Vacuum, Canceling, Cologne, and Choice Belt. So they have all of the answers, which I think with how good Lugia is, and again, we're talking about different things that you can do to beat Lugia, by including all of those cards in your deck, you've made it so even some of the decks that are building themselves entirely around beating you don't have the right tools anymore. You've got the answers for their answers, and they can't like out-tech you in a lot of these situations. And I just think you're so safe if you're a good Lugia player and you sleeve up a list that looks similar to this. That being said, I would like to see some changes in here just to get an extra Marnie in. I don't think you need that many Lugias. And I do think the 16th energy has been pretty good, whether you want that to be V-Guard or an extra color source. I'd like to mess around with that a little more. I'm not sure personally what I like the most as far as my other color energy, if that's the choice or the way that I go. I have been kind of interested in the wash, just the idea of getting that on your Manaphy at some point in the game so that you're Sableye proof, or not Sableye proof, so it's Sableye proof, and then you can't be Kyogre or something, is interesting to me. Alternatively, obviously, drawing 2 cards off of a Speed Lightning, if you happen to hard draw it with your Raikou, is very strong, and V-Guard definitely has its merits as well. So, not sure what the right move there is, but I really like this list in general. I like that we fit all of the techs in. I like that we found a way to shore up all of these matchups. And it's a shame to see that list only in 7th place. And last for top 8 is Grant Hayes with the Aerodactyl Mew deck. Very similar to the list we talked about from Xander a couple weeks ago. No Manaphy in this list, so it's just the normal double turbo Mew stuff. We've got a 4/3 Mew line for Genesect, Oricorio, and then a 1/1 Aerodactyl V-Star. And the Aerodactyl is supposed to be carrying the weight in the Lugia matchup, so if you go first, you basically can't lose to them anymore. If you go second, we've got 3 Judge, as well as a couple 2 Path to the Peak, so that we can disrupt them after we draw a bunch of cards and hope that going Path Judge is enough to make it so they're not able to get set up on their first turn, and presumably they don't find the answer, don't get set up, and you start picking off their board before they can actually get all of their Archeops and V-Star set up, and you can be far enough ahead on prizes when they finally do get there that you don't lose out to just the insane efficiency of Lugia with energies. Again, no cross switchers in this deck. That seems to be like the thing you accept when you play the Aerodactyl, that you can't afford to put more clunky cards that you need like multiples of together at the same time in your deck. I still haven't loved that. I tried playing no Aerodactyl, no cross switcher, and it felt really punishing to not be able to cross switcher and Judge on the same turn. But it's possible that not having the Aerodactyl is the mistake in that equation. I'm not exactly sure, like, from a theory perspective, how that makes sense. When I try to reason my way through the games, the issue doesn't seem to be that I need cross switcher because I missed cross switcher because I don't have Aerodactyl. That doesn't really make sense to me, but it is possible. So I guess, like, for the sake of knowledge, I should give it a shot eventually. But I've played a lot of Mew, and really I think Cross Switcher is a really, really good card in the deck. I've been disappointed every time that I couldn't find a way to Gust and Judge in the same turn. Not like every turn that I couldn't do it, but every game. Like, I've wished there's a pivotal spot in pretty much every game you play with the deck where you wish you could do that. The nice thing you gain is some extra versatility. You've got some Rotom Phones for setup. And this list has a Leafy Camo Poncho to go with the Aerodactyl, so you can get that onto your bench, put the Poncho on it, and now they can't gust it up and knock it out. And that's a really good way for you to keep your board safe. That being said, it doesn't actually seem like it's any good to me. It's just a little bit too clunky in here, and the deck doesn't really need more protection. You've already got a bunch of hand disruption, you've got paths, you've got lost cities. Like this deck is just so heavy on disruptive elements already that I don't think it's worth it. Um, they did keep the Big Charm, which I think is a really good choice. Big Charm is extremely good in this deck, keeping your cards out of range of different knockouts or healing your way out of range for some Sandblast stuff. That makes a lot more sense though when you have at least one, potentially even two switch cards to heal out of certain damage thresholds that things like a Sandblast can hit. And this list plays 0 of them, which I think is just flat out wrong. The other thing that they're not doing, and I'm undecided if this is a good or bad call, is no Hisuian Heavy Ball, which normally obviously you don't play in Mew, and I don't remember if Xander said he liked it or disliked it, but I find it to be a little bit sketchy to have this 1/1 Aerodactyl line that you're really relying on in the Lugia matchup with the way this deck is built and not play the Heavy Ball for if the Aerodactyl is prized, especially when you have 4 Chromomatics to search that up. So to me, that seems like a mistake. I know Xander did day 2 with Mew as well. He didn't play Aerodactyl this time, but still played the Manaphy, which is interesting to me. And the Heavy Ball obviously gets better if you're playing the Manaphy and the Aerodactyl because you've got 2 niche 1-ofs that you might want to get out of your prizes. So that would definitely be something to consider, whether either or both of those cards are worth it. I definitely don't think the Camo Poncho is worth playing in this deck. And I do think that the one choice belt is a good inclusion. I don't know why they decided to go to 0 of that card, but that just seems like a big mistake to me. 2 other decks I do want to talk about from the day 2 of this event. The first one is Ian Robb's 10th place list. He played Palkia and Teleon, and then I'm just going to touch on Control briefly as well, which got 11th. So Palkia and Teleon is a deck that we've talked about a lot, is like a dark horse deck in the format because it really does have a lot of answers for most things that are going on. Inteleon engine to set up your searches and find all of your answers for different situations. Palkia just doing Palkia stuff. Like Palkia was the best deck up until Silver Tempest release, in my opinion, and excuse me, that's because it's just extremely brutally efficient. It does a lot of damage. Energy recursion is really strong. Energy acceleration is really strong. It does both of those things. The weakness is not great right now, but not the end of the world either. Articuno paralyze locks Lugia, and Ice-Q can set up as a win condition in a lot of different matchups as well. You've got all of these Iridas, so you're finding your cards whenever you need them. You can really toolbox through anything. For the Mew matchup, you have Drapion. Plus, often a way to recur it in this list, that appears to just be a Thornton, but you do have the option to play Ordinary Rod as well to shuffle it back in, so you can flip that matchup very easily. And the big tech that came out for this list now, which has been a tech in the past, this isn't new, but is Crabominable V, which is going to flip your matchup against all of the tanky decks. So using Crabominable, which has the effect Destroyer, or the attack Destroyer Punch, which does for water colorless 90 plus, and it does 60 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. So with a couple damage counters sprinkled around, that can take one-shots on Duraludon, that can take one-shots on Goodra, even with Rolling Iron up, so you're able to clear out a lot of these really tanky cards that were actually pretty hard for the deck to knock out before. And additionally, it's got Trigger Avalanche, its first attack for Water Energy, that discards the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. The next thing we're going to talk about is a control deck, and this ability is very good at beating those decks. You're just taking away cards that they weren't expecting to lose, or once they're trying to loop their deck in a way that they didn't expect to lose those cards, and that can give you a lot of different ways to win games. This card just creates avenues to victory that aren't always available and sometimes aren't obvious, which I think is really cool. The one downside is that this guy does have a 4 retreat cost, so you do have to be a little bit more careful when you get it stuck in your active and about finding ways to get it out of that spot, but I think that's worth the risk, and that was a really good inclusion. We have double wash energy in this deck as well, so you have both Manaphy and Ice-Q that you can wash water up to prevent those effects, as well as being able to just do things like, excuse me, tank up your active around Yveltal or things like that to avoid those knockouts. Just really, really well-constructed deck. Double Raihan for when you're falling behind so you can get set up. We've got the Roxanne and Thornton that we talked about. Something that looks a little ugly is there's only 3 Battle VIP Pass in the list, which is gross, but you got to do what you got to do, I guess. And then obviously we have the Emergency Jelly to combo with Articuno and keep ourselves in that Paralyzed Lock situation. And last but not least, we're going to talk about our favorite deck. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out a control player, even without Corey on the pod. So shout out to our guy in 11th place here with the Yveltal Eldegoss. I'm trying to figure out the best way to name this deck, but with Sander control. The whole crew, this is Isaiah Williams. I didn't realize his first name was actually Byron. That is confusing to me. Who came in 11th, and Azul, Grant, and Danny Altavilla all made day 2 as well, though none of them cresting top 32 with the deck, despite like an 8-1 start for Azul. It's always tough to get into those really high spots with control, in my opinion. It's just so finicky in those later rounds in the tournament, especially when people know what you're doing. But we'll talk about the list a little bit. Similar to the deck Sander's been playing, we're not on Flying Pikachu this time, but we've got 4 Yveltal, 2 Gormandized Snorlax, and an unfaced Fat Snorlax, and 2 Eldegoss, 2 Ice-Q, the Sky Circus Starly, which is if you played a Birdkeeper last turn, you don't have to pay its energy cost, and its attack searches for 2 cards and puts them to your hand. One of the Regieleki, the Radiant Greninja, a Miltank, and a Manaphy. And then 4 Washwater energies, as well as all of the double colorlesses and capture energies. And then just a ton of disruptive trainers, multiple Sydneys, multiple Boss's Orders. We've got the Birdkeeper, a Bruno to refill your hand, a couple Thorntons so that you can pivot between which basics you need out of your discard pile, get the right matchup on the board. And 3 Galar Mines and 3 Capes of Toughness. So those Capes are here to help you. Sander talked about this, and we may have mentioned it about his deck before, that when you're not playing Radiant Gardevoir, those Capes make a huge difference, letting your Yveltals tank through Aqua Return from Luminion. And they, again, went with the Radiant Greninja over the Radiant Gardevoir, so you do need those Capes to really keep your Yveltals healthy and not let your opponent get into advantageous positions just by trading into those. Not really anything exciting happening in this list. Fairly standard, but we love control. I'm happy to see it in close to top 8. I don't know, how breakers worked or what their position was, but always happy to see control on the bubble, and I think this list is good. I think it's great to see more people playing it, because when Sander's the only person kind of evolving and innovating the deck, you end up with some really wonky looking brews like the Flying Pikachu list from a couple weeks ago. So glad to see us get somewhere that looks a little bit more streamlined and standard to me, even if it's a little bit less exciting than some of the insane dope stuff that our boy Sander is pulling out. But that really does it for the review of the Orlando Regional. I'm not going to go too far. Corey's off the pod this week because he's not feeling good, and honestly, I'm not feeling great either. But I wanted to get something out there and talk about the regional while it was still fresh, because I did think it was pretty cool and really wanted to harp on how bad our process was. So thanks a ton for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe on whatever platform you use. Check us out on YouTube if you're not already, though not the most exciting video to watch me talk by myself, but hey, it's what we're all here for, right? Thanks a ton, guys.